did not know Weiner. I don't think I ever met Lou before. Of course, I know Zizzy. It's been a long time since I was out in the field, but we've both been around that long. But it's really a trip to meet people who you've heard about over at the other camp for so long. Lou began his TV news career at KFMB in '85, his final semester at SVSU. I guess that means you won't be rooting for the bees either, huh? 28 years later, he's still at FMB. Huge sports fan. Before he graduated from State, he got his first big opportunity interning for Tim Laslovic on the KFMB Weekend Sports Desk. Lewis started producing the news in the early '90s. Over the years, he's been honored with 11 Emmy Awards from the Pacific Southwest chapter of NATAS, as well as having served on the Board of Governors. His proudest news moment, the coverage he helped provide on KFMB during the 2003 Cedar Fire, when he spent a marathon session all day in the control room during News 8's continuous coverage. And here to introduce Lewis to all of you, once again, Skip.
I can't remember if I was Biff or Skip. Hello, my name's Larry and I'm an alcoholic. Long reading, God. 1985 was when Lou got started, and a lot of cross-pollination here because he already worked with you doing sports production. I worked with Laz, so we worked with two of the nicest guys on the planet. He worked with Weiner. And we also did sports with Susan Lichtman. Am I right? Is that right? Susan Lichtman did sports, then she went over and anchored at 39 and with Marty, and they made her change her name because if they did the Lichtman-Levine report, it sounded like a Jewish law firm. He went from sports editing, he did the weekday editing. He was kind of like that Renaissance man who did it all. '89 is that when he started working with Ted for 6 months, which is 10 years in anyone else's life. Weiner had 3 wives in that 6 months. During those days, I'd seen Weiner walk down the halls, and I would walk by him, and I always had the urge to say to him, "Hey, Ted, did you ever think once that you might be the problem?" Then, Lou got hooked up with a really good guy. He did that 8 Cares program with Tim Flannery, another superhuman being, and that was a great program that showed he could just about do it all. Then he paid his real dues doing that morning show producer-writer thing, which my hat's off to anybody who gets up at 3 a.m. makes their lips move at 4. And then started producing full-time in '95, and he's been there through all of the good times. He's one of those guys who's unflappable. He can stand in the middle of a fire and direct traffic and keep things going and be calm about it. We've had some wonderful talks over the years about our kids. We brag about our kids to each other. He's got very talented, creative musicians in his family. Got Michael and got Jordan, Matthew rather, and Jordan. And it's fun to share stories about them. But if there's one thing that I've learned from Lou, and it's a thing that he has said to me over and over again, and it has really shaped my career, at least 3 to 4 times a week, Lou will say to me, "Cut! Cut! Cut!" Come on up.
Big cut.
Wow.
Seems like we're waiting for hours to come up here.
It's hard not to check my phone because the 49ers are about to kick off if they haven't already against the Packers. So, but I'm thrilled to be here, and I can wait on the game for a few minutes. Larry, thank you very much. It's indeed an honor and a privilege to be here with you all. Larry, what can I say? You're the consummate professional. Features, sports, weather. You do it all with a sense of pride and professionalism, and a little bit of humor, too. Thank you for that gracious introduction. First, I'd like to congratulate my longtime co-worker, Moana Pitcher. We've spent many hours talking about stuff over the years, and Moana is really deserving of this honor. Anybody who has worked with her over the years would tell you the same thing. She is simply amazing. Not only does she do her job efficiently, she does it with passion and with genuine care for the people that she works with. And I'm proud to be here with you today, Moana. Thank you. I'd also like to offer my congratulations to all the other inductees today, especially my two former colleagues, Artie, and who was nice enough to show that great picture of the two of us. Actually, if you look closely, I do have a mustache that I no longer have, because I think once I stood side by side with that guy, I realized that. Thank you, and Sandra as well. It's an honor to be here with you today. I'd also like to thank the Pacific Southwest chapter of NATAS for bestowing this honor and hosting this wonderful luncheon. I'd also like to say thanks to the anonymous person who nominated me for this honor. I still don't know who that is, and if you would ever like to tell me, that would be great, but they choose to stay anonymous, so thank you very much to whomever that is if they're here today, and if not, then you're not. How cool it is for me that my very first news director, Jim Holtzman, you've heard Jim, he's gotten a lot of accolades today, and I'm just really thrilled that he's here today. Jim actually hired me. He was always a huge supporter of mine, especially during some tough times and some layoffs. And Jim always had my back, and to this day, I'm really appreciative. So thank you. I'd also like to thank my fabulous News 8 co-workers who are all here today. Moana, Gold, Barb, Tom, Kenny, all you guys. It is really a thrill for you to be here, and so thank you. And of course, I wouldn't be here without the woman who I love, my wife of 27 years, Christine. And even when I worked those terrible morning hours for 3.5 years, she never complained. She's always been there by my side and has always supported me, and I love you. Thank you very much. And also, great thanks to my two sons, Matthew and Jordan. Matthew lives in Northern California. He's a musician. He's playing a gig or doing something. He couldn't make it down. My younger son, Jordan, is here, and I'm thrilled that you're here. Thank you. I mentioned Jim. I'd also like to give thanks to the 3 other news directors that I've worked with at News 8. The late Steve Ramsey gave me my first opportunity to produce. Steve was quite a character, as anybody who worked with him would tell you. Steve held no punches and always told it like it is. But Steve was extremely loyal, and he always looked out for me, and I'm forever grateful for that. It was also a great privilege to work under Fred D'Ambrosi, who's now at WUSA in Washington, D.C., and of course my current news director, Dean Elwood. One thing Fred and Dean have in common, they're both Green Bay Packers fans, and that's why Dean isn't here today. He chose the Packers over me, but that's okay. Anybody who knows me for any length of time, they know I'm a huge 49ers fan, and the Niners are playing the Packers today. But I'm recording the game, Dean. But that's quite all right.
You want to know the score?
No. If you hear a score, don't tell me. Anybody who's ever produced news, live news, knows that anything can happen. There are a few standout moments. First, I want to touch briefly on my time as a sports producer for 6 months with Ted Leitner, the worst 6 months of my life, without doubt. Anybody who knows Ted knows that Ted didn't show up until he needed to be on the air. If he was on at 4:20, he'd be in at 4:15. The sports office is upstairs and faces the window. It's one of the few windows in that newsroom. It faces the parking lot. And Ted used to do a segment called Son of Sports. And I don't know if you remember being such a talent that they wanted to get him into the newscast twice instead of once. So it was about 5:15 where he would come on and do something dumb, funny. Well, it was the producer who had to set that up. So I never knew what Ted would want to do. So I literally would have to edit stacks of tapes, stacks of them, because I didn't know what he would choose. And it would come down, it was 10 after 5, the segment's 5 minutes away, Ted still wasn't there. And so I'd be looking out the window, seeing if Ted would find it. And finally Ted would come up, and he would tell me what he wanted, and I'd have to run it down. I hated that friggin' job. So, to this day, I appreciated the, I love doing sports. I'm still a huge sports fan, but sports producing wasn't mine. But I would like to talk about my producing, and one of my favorite moments was when I was producing the 6 a.m. show, and we had a guest on from Taste of the Nation. That's the event in which you could sample different foods from different restaurants. And our guest brought a tray filled with food on our set. And my anchors at the time were John Kalia and Carol Hassett. I think she was filling in for Lorraine Kimmel. And one of the items was an artichoke. And apparently John had never eaten an artichoke before. So John is trying to be professional that he is, and he's tasting some food. So he takes the pointy leaf of the artichoke and he puts it in his mouth. And immediately I knew we were in trouble because he couldn't talk anymore. And then I see Carol, who is trying desperately not to lose it. She is literally keeping it as hard as she can from cracking up. John, it took about 2 minutes. He actually swallowed the on set. He was unflappable. He was a true pro. He never knew that he was in such pain. But he kept going as if nothing ever happened. And that's one of those memories from my early producing days that I'll never forget. Another memorable moment was in '96, the Republican National Convention. We got to produce, I was producing the morning show, and it was such a thrill getting the chance to go down to the convention center every morning for that week and produce our shows down there. I really felt big time. I felt like I was a part of something special, and I felt like I was important and I was doing important work. And that's one of the proudest moments I have looking back on the Republican National Convention. In the days after 9/11, we didn't do a lot of local news. We were actually on the network for most of the time. It must have been a straight week. We did very, very few local newscasts during that time. But I remember the emotional drain of having to work that first day. We knew very little information about what happened. And then as the days followed, we slowly pieced it together and we learned what had happened. And I'll never forget the impact that those days had on me as a journalist, realizing the importance of getting the accurate information to people who needed it and at the important time in their life. And there was nothing more important than accuracy to get that information out to the people. So 9/11 is something I'll never forget, and it touched me dearly. My most emotional moment in the booth during live breaking news coverage came during the 2003 Cedar Fire. We were on the air, as Larry told you, for countless consecutive hours, but one moment in particular stands out to me. Our reporter, Heather Lucas, who's married to our Jeff Zeppeli, Heather was a reporter for a time. She's now becoming a nurse, so good for her. But Jeff is still there. Heather was standing in front of a house in Scripps Ranch that had just caught fire. And my heart stopped for a minute because I thought to myself, I recognize that house. So I called my wife quickly and I said, "Hon, turn on the TV." And I said, "Is that the Rasmussen's house?" And she said, "Yes." And our son Matthew was best friends with Matt Rasmussen, their child. The night before, we had been there for a barbecue celebrating our families and our friendship. And so for the next 20 minutes, I watched in horror as I was trying to do my job as the best I could. Our friend's house burned to the ground. And the impact that had on me is something that will never go away, because I felt I was a part of the news that I was covering, and I had never felt that before. So that's just one of those moments that I'll never forget. And we're still friendly with them to this day. They rebuilt and they're doing great. And I just will never forget the moment of watching our friend's house burn to the ground. As I wrap up, I want to say one last thing. The TV news industry has changed dramatically in 25 years. The transition from analog to digital news gathering and the move toward automation has cost a lot of great, hardworking people their jobs. Perhaps that was inevitable, but one thing that remains is our ability to report the news in an honest fashion, relying on good, hard-nosed reporting. Social networks can be useful in some respects, but please remember, Facebook is not an unidentified source, and Twitter is not an eyewitness. Thank you very much.